Thank you all very much. I am grateful to the committee, to Diane Diaz-Stefazio, Kara McLaughlin, and Sarah Allison. This prize often serves as a Lifetime Achievement Award, and it is a shock to see my name listed among those of my research heroes. I especially recognize James Mosley and Michael Twyman, who passed away last year. Now, I can't say that this award is a dream of mine because I hadn't dared to dream it. I accept it with profound gratitude and honor and disbelief. I was asked to give a statement of philosophy about printing history's present and its future. I recognize that not everybody in this room would identify as a historian. Some of us are printers, some are librarians or curators or conservators across the GLAM sector or galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. Some of us are collectors or dealers. Some are printing press builders, woodblock manufacturers, printing ink grinders. Printing history is many things. Our field is small, but our remit is huge. It's interdisciplinary, cross-sectorial, and international. So today, I want to focus on the significance of history to the members of the American Printing History Association. Even those of us who don't identify as historians recover and preserve artifacts, documentation, and skills to interpret the materials and techniques of printing. For me, I understand printing history as the exploration of the physical production of information and of knowledge itself across all disciplines of the arts and humanities and sciences, and everything that has engaged with content that was printed. Like all kinds of historical inquiry, printing history is incurring unprecedented risks. 10 years ago, the former UK Education Secretary Michael Gove said people in this country have had enough of experts. It now seems quaint. Today, about half of UK universities are in deficit and cutting staff for programs. The national funding body pays PhD students below the poverty line. Over 15% of museums, or 500, have closed in 5 years. This is not benign neglect. And in the US, a rapidly escalating campaign of assaulting higher education and GLAM aims to control knowledge sectors and fact and truth itself to reconstruct history, artifacts, and the knowledge they embody, and the experts to interpret them, and the infrastructure to preserve them are all at risk. In Trump's term, history faces civilizational erasure. Now, I've experienced this differently than most. Kathleen Baker and Rebecca Chung modeled ways of acknowledging women's life events in knowledge production in their volume on women in printing and publishing. Many of you don't know this, but 6 years ago, COVID left me disabled, and it changed how I can do printing history. I had to relearn reading skills. My projects were interrupted, some for years. I can't join you today because I'm awaiting a wheelchair part. And at one point, I thought my research career was over. So I keenly feel the risks of rupturing that continuity of knowledge and practice. And I keenly feel the need to engage with the past using whatever resources we can make available, including remotely. So all of this has changed not just how, but why I do printing history. As printing historians, we are guardians of a heritage of physically produced information. Preserving artifacts and skills requires protecting individuals and institutions to extract information from them. All four are essential for the understanding of the human past and the survival of our field. So for me, doing printing history today means preserving the historical record and the knowledge it embodies, and using the resources available to us, whatever they are, to defend fact and history and knowledge against attack. How do we do this? Well, one thing we can do is vigorously protect the objects and the tools and the skills that are needed to use them, to safeguard the objects and the knowledge of our field. Printing history faces special risk because it requires engagement with artifacts and skills that are difficult to identify and maintain. In my work, this might involve reclassifying color frisket sheets from waste to the earliest artifacts of printing presses in the West, like these. I remain grateful to APHA for funding this project. Or reattributing late medieval and early modern woodcuts to credit their forgotten color printers, because giving a name is an act of protection. Printing presses and equipment and machines are outside many GLAM bodies' acquisitions policies. These things measure by the ton and the square meter, not the sheet and the shelf foot. Collections that have scope may not have space. And if acquired, these working things can be denatured as relics that cannot be used. This risks losing the skills needed to manufacture and employ and repair them. And then, when there's a will, there isn't always a way. The UK's National Printing Heritage Trust has been trying to raise funds for a National Museum of Printing since 2016, back when Gove wearied of experts. There are so many objects at risk. There are so many drops in this budget, and the risks are so real. So to me, doing printing history today means using whatever resources are available to safeguard the tangible historical record, the historical skills it supports, and the infrastructure to use it against civilizational erasure. A second thing we can do is vigorously defend collaboration and knowledge production to safeguard our community. In this context, collaborative research can be a form of activism. Through my volumes, I hope to forge communities that bypass the silos of academic disciplines that engage with the historical record on its own terms. So far, they showcase the work of over 80 experts. That's printers, librarians, curators, collectors, and conservators, not just academics. And they present methodologies, not just for academic study, but for cataloging, remaking, and using these objects. Last year, my co-editor, Meg Rosselli, and I published Printing Color 1700 to 1830. We pushed it to move past art museums and libraries to explore printing history and collections of pottery, textiles, medicine, and currency. With nearly 30 contributors, we expanded the corpus of 18th century color printing from a few fine artworks into genuinely millions of objects like the ones you see here. This year, Printing Things, which I'm editing with from Spielberg, again with about 30 contributors, will discuss tens of thousands of heritage woodblocks and copper plates. Many are uncatalogued and considered uncatalogable, and we aim to establish them as objects of research independent from the content they printed. Now, these numbers are big, but they're still just drops in the bucket. Printing historians are a living library of generational wisdom, and this work is possible only because of the wide range of printing historical skills that the contributors have maintained. So digitization progresses, but printing histories between the gaps location and collaborative knowledge production practices means that it can support fundamental research across humanities and GLAM sectors on an incredible scale. It can uncover new categories of heritage materials that hide in plain sight, and it can interpret them using the vast amounts of information they offer. So to me, doing printing history today means advocating for it and creating platforms to formalize and promote its unique norms. A third thing we can do is vigorously defend incoming printing historians to safeguard our field. The landscape affects the lives and careers of everyone who engages with history in any way. Because printing history falls into the gaps between academic fields and GLAM sectors, it's especially vulnerable to cuts. In my case, printing history has led me on a pinball career trajectory that many of you will recognize. There's fixed term and precarious roles. I've worked in GLAM collections, the trade, departments of history of art and English and history, but squares on this bingo card are fading to the point that the game just can't be played. I witnessed the chilling effects through the eyes of the PhD and postdoc and at-risk and refugee scholars I support. In my work, I do try to recover silenced voices of the past where I can. One small example relates to recognizing women's collaborative role in family projects. William Blake is credited with the famous episode of color printmaking, but I refer instead to Catherine and William Blake to highlight his wife's role in their collaborative work. This is a drop in the bucket, and there's so much to do, but so little funding and so much professional and personal risk. Today's honor is all the greater because I stand in the shadow of individual laureates who do give great speech to those voices, including Caden Henningsen on trans printers and Lisa Baskin on women printers. APHA models how a field can stand behind the explorers of these at-risk topics. I also support printing historians at risk. This is crucial to my research as well. My work has been greatly enriched through the NGO Science for Ukraine. It pairs at-risk and refugee Ukrainian scholars who are with mentors who are familiar with other countries' research norms. If you might be interested in joining me in supporting Ukrainian printing history and printing historians, please contact me or Science for Ukraine at this email address. So to me, doing printing history today means safeguarding the future of the field, supporting those whose work is most vulnerable, whether those risks are professional or personal or both. I'm delighted that the committee is not awarding me money today, but a certificate, because it means that APHA is prioritizing the printing historians who are incoming or without recourse to institutional funding. It's one concrete action that can safeguard printing history's experts. A fourth thing we can do is vigorously defend our institutions to safeguard printing history's very special kind of expertise outside academia. Our institutions of knowledge can be elite museums or messy print shops. From their origins as fields of inquiry around 1800, print and book history elevated collectors and scholars' connoisseurship over collection professionals' knowledge production and maker's craft skills. Today, scoping in a collection can be dismissed as discovery, even if it leads to cataloging, and both might be belittled as precursors to the real research of interpretation. So, in a tidal wave of the new genre of making us matter, printing historians might be called upon to justify our existence. In the UK, in the age of the Research Excellence Framework, or REF, our descriptive qualitative outputs might be discouraged because they don't meet the REF's idiosyncratic definition of long-form qualitative research as 4-star and world leading. Experiential knowledge gained at the press is even more suspect. This is slowly changing, but printing historians have long been making and knowing without recognition. Printing history recognizes that the discovery, description, and cataloging projects are research. They do make contributions to scholarship in and of themselves. We might be used to this, but it is remarkable, and it must be defended. So to me, doing printing history today might mean reconceiving of it as a vast reserve of case studies that can help justify at-risk investments in history, collections, research and making infrastructures. Every rediscovery and reinterpretation and reinterpretation can contribute to scholarship or safeguard knowledge against erasure. Every engagement of object-based cross-sector expertise in making collections or academia, which might look like an afternoon workshop at a messy press with grad students, is a drop in the bucket. But if you do it with intentionality and you explain the significance of your actions, you might find a way to help communicate our work's value to incoming printing historians and policymakers and hostile audiences. So I'd like to end with more thanks. Being a printing historian means navigating between the worlds of collections, print shops, and academic fields, and I am indebted to those who have helped me to do so. In particular, I thank Alex Franklin, Meg Rosselli, David McKitterick, Raphael Morin, and Linda Steiber-Morenas. I thank the 200 members of the listserv community Blocks, Plate, Stones, which I moderate with Giles Burgle, and I hope you will join for celebrating how printing history requires a collective effort from many perspectives. I thank Stacey Scott. I thank Lisa Dalla Valle. I thank Magda Hunto-Natra, who is my library legs when I can't physically access collections. And most of all, I thank Michelle. I'm grateful to those who nominated me. Every APHA event I have ever engaged with has been great fun. And as an academic, that is the highest praise. None of us have to be here, but all of us want to be here. This community is a bastion against current threats. This honor means all the more coming from you. So I hope you'll join me in applauding the APHA for its work to valorize so many kinds of printing history expertise, to create communities to safeguard the historical record of printing and the skills to interpret it, and to honor our hugely diverse predecessors at the press by using the tools that are available to us to protect truth and fact. Drops in the bucket add up, and printing history is precious and worth protecting. So thank you all once again. This acceptance speech was finalized and recorded on the 15th of December, 2025. The video is dated January 24th, 2026, because that's when it was played at APHA's annual meeting. Now I realized as I was leaving that meeting that my speech already belonged to the past. So I'd like to offer an afterword. I'll survey some changes to offer future readers a snapshot of what this rapidly shifting landscape looks like today. Then I'll propose a revised ending to the speech, one that I would have put forward if I had written it on the day that it were delivered. So where are we, the state of play in mid-December 2026, a lifetime ago? When I wrote this speech, Trump's use of civilizational erasure was in the news. I want to really emphasize for future readers that this chilling phrase, which foreign governments immediately condemned as white supremacist ideology, quickly disappeared in the madcap speed of the news cycle. However, the Trump administration's mirror image actions have continued apace to erase cultural and historical evidence in research and heritage collections that don't conform to its ideals. Now, back then, some researchers and heritage and research institutions had been silenced from engaging with historical evidence that countered the Trump administration's narrative, with only a few of those knowledge institutions had faced an extinction-level event so far. Perhaps more importantly, and I'll talk about this in a minute, the Trump administration's compact for universities was long off the radar. No universities had accepted this voluntary memo. It was believed the Trump administration had abandoned it. It had been out of the news for months. But I want to clarify what it was. It offered a test cohort of universities membership in a scheme that would offer the choice between either restrictions on academic freedom with the apparent intent to transform all members and bodies of the university into propaganda generators on one hand, or devastating funding cuts on the other. Member universities would pledge to police noncompliance, such as any activity considered to belittle conservative ideas, including with lawful force or violence, even preventatively. The wording suggests that noncompliance might become a federal crime. At least the Department of Justice would have oversight over adherence. So as for all domains, this would have massive and immediate ramifications for printing history and printing historians. That includes for all higher education linked spaces of creative production like print shops, sites of research like collections of printed materials, and of course for the people who work in and study and use them. And all of that was current as of last month, around the 15th of December. So mid-January in 2026, things had changed. In the days before the speech was played, world leaders had frankly started discussing the complete collapse of the international rules-based order. And Amnesty International had reported that the rise of authoritarianism in the US had reached an emergency stage, for example. And then on the 24th of January, 2026, so when I left APHA's annual meeting, I learned that Alex Pretty had been killed a few hours earlier. His is often discussed as the second killing of a US citizen by US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, in plain view, public view, after Renee Good on the 7th of January. But their killings followed dozens of shootings and dozens of deaths from shootings and other causes of mainly non-white, non-US citizens under ICE's authority or custody. And that of Keith Porter, a Black US citizen, on the 31st of December 25. Now, their deaths have attracted so much less attention than those of the two white US citizens, even though some were also shot to death in public view, including Porter. But this is where we are right now. Goods and Pretty's deaths are widely considered to mark a turning point, and Vice President J.D. Vance's response to public outcry included announcing that ICE agents are now protected by absolute immunity. So a pattern is emerging. When the Trump administration makes statements about these deaths, its claims are incompatible with evidence that was captured in bystander videos, and they use that mirror image logic to blame the victims for their own deaths. These are very clearly situations where both things cannot be true at once. A couple of weeks ago, such killings were unimaginable, as were such blatantly counterfactual, easily disproven official statements, even given the very long acclimatization to both Trump administration's alternative facts, in the words of Kellyanne Conway, Trump's former press secretary a decade ago. So now, where we are, no fact is safe. Globally significant, unique, and digitized research materials face being tossed away despite international outcries because they challenge the Trump administration's views. No higher education affiliated research body or collection or creative makerspace is safe. A more robust version of the compact, and this is important, called Compact 2.0, is in development to enforce compliance regardless of whether schools sign on. And empirical observation to establish fact itself is not safe. For institutions, dispassionately maintaining and documenting evidence can bring risk of closure by financial starvation or mission abandonment. For individuals, at least in the context of ICE agents, and at least for now, the same brings risk of life-changing injury and death. In terms of the demonization and the silencing of empirical observation, you could say that these are all sides of the same trick coin. Today, as I was finalizing this afterward, an ICE agent summarized the interconnectedness in a threat to make an unarmed person stop observing. If you raise your voice, I'll erase your voice. So, a revised ending. In this context, I return to the question I was asked to address. Why does the field of printing history matter in 2026? If I had written this speech on the 24th of January, the date it was delivered, I would have ended it very differently with something like this. Theorists discuss existential threats or threats to existence in broad terms, but they are easier to perceive in personal terms. Threats to ourselves, our friends and family, the institutions we care about. Like everyone else, I can only speak from my own experience. I'm the granddaughter of an illegal alien in the US, and the hateful term used by the Trump administration. I celebrate any way of leaving Nazi Germany as an unequivocal good. And then, when I was about the same age, I had to immigrate from the US in order to access full civil rights, including the right to marry. And now, as an American and German and British citizen, I'm an immigrant no matter where I go. As a visibly disabled lesbian perma immigrant with this family background, I know that I'm unusually sensitive to risks and patterns that some may not perceive. And I'm also very sensitive to the importance of protecting history in the limited ways that I can. But this time, a vast number of expert authorities and everyday people are pinpointing that we're at the same moment on the arc of a familiar plotline that a recent traumatized generation of my family and so many others believed would never be repeated. So, as a printing historian, a historian and practitioner of the communication of information in the broadest terms, I consider the erosion of the evidence-based approach that has defined knowledge since the Enlightenment as core to the Trump administration's deeply interconnected projects to purge woke thought and target groups including migrants and trans people and Black people and Indigenous people and other people of color. And I think together they form a project that could be positioned as correcting America's past, present, and future. So to reimagine America's past, the program of historical revision involves suppressing and rewriting scholarly narratives and compromising the collections are based on, destroying data and resources that document those stories, targeting experts who refuse to comply, and defunding knowledge institutions. To reimagine America's present, the many fronts also include ICE raids and detention centers. For America's future and the world's, so much more is now at risk. Of course, protecting human life is paramount. Protecting history is also paramount. These are things that can be true at once. And print shops are famously sites for free speech and free thought. As printing historians, we can apply theoretical frameworks to our own spheres of activity and influence to understand how these points are connected and to ensure that we use our words and actions with intention. For example, as Hannah Arendt wrote, it's essential to counter actions that have exploded the limits of the law. For example, ICE's record-breaking violation of court orders and the protocol-breaching purging of objects and resources with that improper ideology from clam collections. One strategy for doing so is upholding what Arendt called the disinterested pursuit of truth that precedes all of our theoretical and scientific traditions. And in our case, that's impartial research and collection management, such as APHA's bolstering of the understanding of artifacts and practices linked to members of marginalized and at-risk communities. And there are a lot of them. And this can be done only in institutions of free thought or higher education and heritage institutions, creative maker spaces, print shops, and with discussions and actions in what she called spaces of appearance or public fora for speech and action. Depending on content, this could include that APHA meeting or a workshop at the press. In the announcement of this year's awards, I want to say in conclusion, APHA reiterated its promise from 2020 to strengthen education about and promote and support printers and allied craft workers who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Now, it has used its most prestigious platform to celebrate the work of the Pyramid Atlantic Art Center, which privileges inclusivity in printing practices by awarding it this year's Institutional Laureate. The current program of workshops and exhibition of prints by Hadia Williams that explores her identity and experiences as a Black woman in this world are so important. That APHA has redoubled its commitment to supporting spaces of appearance and is taking actions like varying its template to create a platform for this afterward, models how a small scholarly society can serve as a modern version of what Arendt called a refuge for truth, a site for the disinterested pursuit of fact in academia and in cultural heritage institutions. APHA has about 300 members, or about 0.000087446% of the US population. We are a drop in the bucket, but drops in the bucket do add up. Thank you once again.